It's finally time to review Black Mamba. At last. This famous inverted coaster is located at one of the best theme parks in Europe, Phantasialand in Germany. It's known for its high intensity and interaction with the terrain and theming. It's one of only 2 European inverts known for this kind of experience, as Nemesis at Alton Towers was the original of this concept. It's a much loved ride that's often called one of the best inverting looping coasters for its overall experience and high thrill level. And after my revisit of July of 2023, I can definitely see its value.
I feel so alive!
So let's talk about the quirks and screws of this thing.
I'm talking about that old school, man.
Black Mamba is a B&M inverted coaster. It was one of the old school ones with a pre-drop, classic flat spins, and high intensity, although the second to last of the old school ones before B&M started modernizing their design, which they did with Osiris.
New is always better.
It opened in 2006, and it features 32 rider trains over 8 rows. It's got the classic over-the-shoulder restraints, standard B&M style, comfortable, room for weightlessness, and also prone to headbanging. But we'll talk about that later. It's 85.3 feet tall, which is small in height granted, but it makes up for it by being dug into the ground. This thing basically goes into a lot of holes, which really makes the height not matter. It's 2,519.7 feet long, which is definitely one of the shorter coasters in the park. It's actually only longer than Reich and the Winches coasters. And it goes 49.7 miles an hour, which is the second fastest coaster in the park after Taron. It has a ride duration of 44 seconds from the lift hill to the final brake run, which is a very solid length, especially for a ride packing in lots of intensity. It's not long, but it's not really that short either, considering the fact that it packs a punch. And in that layout, it's got 4 inversions. All of these are classic B&M looper elements, nothing original, but very delivering, with a small and very aesthetic vertical loop, a 0G roll, and 2 fast-paced corkscrews.
The blackest black you have ever seen.
You don't get to see much of Black Mamba. That's what's so great about its appearance. You get a tease so you can imagine the rest. Basically, when you walk around deep in Africa and Phantasialand, you see a bit of the lift hill, the drop, the loop going absolutely amazing around the bridge, which is so freaking cool, and then some of the 0G roll and the junior implement. That's about it.
I want more.
From there, it's a mystery until you get more reveal as you traverse the queue line. There's a bit of track here, a helix here, part of a corkscrew here, and it's so cool how it intertwines with everything it's around, and how you can only see a little bit at a time. It also makes the area feel more like an actual mystery jungle. And it's also no secret that the track just looks great. It's a beautiful and very clean black color. It doesn't look worn at all, and I wouldn't be surprised if it got repainted very recently.
Sweet baby Jesus.
And basically everything about its appearance, the way it interacts with the bridge, the terrain, and all the buildings looks stunning, and it's incredible to watch as well. It's truly one of the best looking coasters I've ever seen, just like the other 2 big boys in the park.
Gravity. Not enough? We're not here. Too much? You're crushed.
The layout starts out with a small right turn in the darkness before you hit the chain lift hill with a bunch of awesome scenery around you. Then you have a pre-drop. Now if you sit in the back row, this pre-drop can be a bit uncomfortable. You can sort of knock your head back and forth in it. But in the front row, it's just there. But I mean, it's a pre-drop. It's literally not meant to do anything. You go into a twisted drop though that turns about 90 degrees to the right. In the front row, you'll only feel very weak laterals, so not really anything to talk about there. But in the back row, you get a quick lateral snap to the left. It's nothing special, and I don't really care that much for it, but it's not a bad drop either. But at the bottom of the drop, you start going upwards as you head into the vertical loop. And this is where I hope you're wearing your diapers, because as soon as it starts going upwards, and especially through the vertical loop, you hit a lot of G-forces. Especially in the front row, you're pushed hard into your seat through the entire inversion. And in the back row, that's the same thing, except you're not going balls to the wall into it. Instead, you're being pulled hardcorely through it. It's just a really forceful vertical loop with a lot of speed, and doesn't feel like it lets up, doesn't feel awkward like the loop on Demonin, for example. After that is a 0G roll, which is very low to the ground and super cool, and also has great snap and whip. You get a quick snap towards your your right with laterals, and then stay afloat with great weightlessness through the entire thing. It's not mind-blowingly whippy, but you definitely get pushed to the side, and you go through it very fast, so you definitely feel a great thrill here. It's a really good 0G roll. Then you go into the junior implement. This is not an inversion, hence the junior name.
You think I could end up being as good as my dad if I keep practicing?
Your dad?
It's basically an implement inversion turned into a sharp overbank, and I find it kind of funny that the only two B&M inverts with this element are the only two B&M inverts I've ridden, with the other one being Monster at Grönaland. But the junior implement, especially in the front row, has some really nice positive forces to it. Unfortunately, in the back row, you don't get as much force. It definitely has some forces, but it is not really that intense. It's just decent with the force back there. Then comes the first corkscrew, and these corkscrews are really whippy, especially if you sit on the right side. Whoa! Not only will you get a strong lateral whip toward your right, but you'll also feel positive forces in these. These are so fast that you will not get to feel any weightlessness. Instead, you're being pulled around like it's an upside down turn. So you get whipped to the side while also being pushed into your seat very quickly. This is an awesome inversion. Then you go into an overbank, which also has a little bit of positive forces, although not a whole lot. It is sustained though, which is very nice. Then you go into the second corkscrew, and this is the exact same story as the first corkscrew. Very snappy, very intense, generally just forceful. After this is a right turn, and basically all the turns from the rest of the ride have about the same amount of force. How much force is that? A lot. It's a lot of force. This right turn has some great, strong, positive forces. It goes into a small twisted drop, which doesn't really provide any whip per se, but you do feel a very tiny amount of weightlessness. I wouldn't call it airtime by any means, but you definitely feel like the positive forces really let you go for a second before you move into a 270-degree helix. This helix also has some great positive forces. They're strong, and in this case, very sustained, no matter where you sit, and you just get pulled harshly through this turn. It's great. Then there's a twisted drop, again with some very weak weightlessness, and then a twisted ascent to the left, which is the same thing here. The turn in between also has some nice positive forces, but yeah, these up and down twisty moments themselves have very weak weightlessness, but not really any float or airtime per se, and the whip isn't anything special, but they feel very funky, very fun and unique, and I like these elements. They remind me a lot of the small twisty section on Draukong actually, except this has a lot more speed to it. Then there's the 360-degree helix. Once again, just like the prior helix, forceful and sustained. You are well pushed into your seat throughout this helix, and you really feel like your feet are stealing all the blood from your body. Then there's a 180-degree turnaround, which is also decently forceful, just as much force as the prior turns and helices, before hitting the final brake run in utter complete darkness. And that is the layout of Black Mamba. It's simple yet very well made, and it just has a lot of positive forces, some great whip as well, and well, that's about it.
I'm the fastest in the world.
Black Mamba has phenomenal pacing, and it is full speed from start to finish. It just goes really fast. The forces don't let up. It is forceful all the way through.
Have mercy, please.
There is no mercy.
And it only has the kinds of elements which generally keep your interest. So pacing regarding whether or not something interesting is always happening is very good. And regarding speed, it also is, because it just never feels like it slows down. It just feels like it goes very fast, especially due to how low to the ground it is. You're just never bored here because of the layout and because of the near misses keeping you occupied at all times. And trust me, if you sit in the front row especially, you are constantly thinking about whether or not your feet are gonna hit something. But generally, something just always happens. It never slows down. Great job, B&M.
My goodness, doll, you're shaking like a leaf.
Black Mamba is decently smooth, although definitely not perfect. You can definitely feel that it has aged, and that especially goes for the back row. The back row is rattly and also grants a few moments of headbanging. That especially goes for the first drop, which actually kind of hurts. And then in the corkscrews as well, you can also get a headbanging there if you sit in the back row. And back there, it did manage to disrupt my enjoyment of the ride a tad, which is why when I rode it for the second time 1 year later in the front row, I thought this ride was much better because the front row is relatively smoother, and I had a much better time at not only enjoying the layout, but also noticing why this ride is so great. The front row basically has a normal B&M rattle, if you will, which I do not mind at all. You're shaking a bit from side to side, but you're not banging your head, and generally I just don't care about it up there, as opposed to the back row. But overall, it is generally a smooth ride, but it's not without having a bit of evil sludged in there. If you've heard of this ride beforehand, you probably know it for its high quality and quantity theming and how it's dug into the ground with rockwork all over the place. It's a reason it's often compared with the Nemesis at Alton Towers, and by God is it awesome. Let me walk you through this beauty's themed experience.
So let's just jump into it.
As we mentioned earlier, you first get the appearance and the general atmosphere, which really kicks off the themed experience. You definitely feel like you are in Africa, even though, I mean, I've never been there, so I can't relate. But you're immersed immediately. Then the queue line takes you through the jungle with many small details, small buildings, and have great authentic architecture. But there are sounds of wildlife like monkeys and insects, and atmospheric cultural things like bongo drums. There's exotic foliage everywhere, and you're just completely hidden away and can't really see outside of where you're in the queue line and a bit of the coaster and everything surrounding that. You go deeper and deeper into the trenches before reaching the station, which is one of my favorite ever. It's filled with African tribe theme from what I'm guessing represents something hidden in the heart of the Congo. There's wooden arches and ritual set pieces. It really reminds me of a lot of the architecture from the 2005 King Kong movie. It's really dark too, and it's lit up by beautiful colored lights. I just love this theming. Anyway, you go through the theme building and the foliage up the lift hill, which is really cool and really pretty as well. It just feels cool when you go through the hut as well when you're on the lift hill. The layout, of course, has so many rocks, foliage, dirt, water, and also buildings and tunnels. Everything just looks and feels so real. And it's extremely complete and interactive due to the near-miss effect. Again, you're constantly feeling like you're actually scraping your feet across the ground and the cliffs. It is unbelievably complete, and I love all of this to bits. And of course, it's completely dark on the brake run, with the gates opening into the station then. It's one of the most well-themed coasters I've ever done, and after I got a front row, I really appreciate it so much more. Man, Phantasialand really seems to have something going for them when it comes to theming big thrill coasters, and I know exactly where they can add a fourth thrill coaster with this level of theming. Bye-bye, crazy bats.
The goofiest snakes I could find.
Overall, Black Mamba is one hell of an invert. It's one of my favorite B&M coasters, and while it's not the craziest or most impressive B&M inverted coaster in itself, it still packs a hard punch and features many intense elements. And when you add that to the highly themed experience, which is incredibly well fulfilled and even stands out worldwide,
Mr. Worldwide,
it becomes a world-class invert and a rare, highly thrilled coaster to be completely covered with theming, which again is this park's speciality. It's by no means a perfect coaster, nor does it compete with the best of the best, but it does deserve a lot of praise, which I thankfully realized after my revisit. So I think it deserves a 9 out of 10 for a coaster overall. It's a high score for a highly satisfying experience. It's merely lacking the points for not being the most mind-blowing ride necessarily, and definitely being somewhat outdated, and it may not be everyone's favorite.
Hello, Lisha.
But hopefully this is a score that a lot can agree is somewhat in the right area, considering what it has to offer, which is a lot. It's still a ride that really feels like it isn't at its peak outside of the front row though, which I needed to fully appreciate it. But man, I love it now. So let me know what you think about Black Mamba or generally Phantasialand and the other coasters here. What do you think about this compared to other inverts around the world? Like, have you ridden Nemesis or are gonna ride it soon? Tell me stuff. Let me read. Bye!